have really weird questions, so I'm down for weird questions or normal questions.
Where are you from?
Oh gosh, I'm from space. I was born in Bangalore. My folks are from Tamil Nadu, though. I want to establish that distinction. From a different province. I'm a rural girl. I was born in Bangalore Hospital. And then I moved to Ohio, like I mentioned in one of my first poems. Then I moved to Missouri. I mostly grew up in Missouri. This weekend I'm flying from San Francisco, because I live there now.
Yay!
Yay!
I was curious, like whenever you go back to India, like what kind of reactions do you get? Like I can imagine, I can totally imagine, but I just want to know.
So I went back to India last summer, and a lot of my poems are about sort of the traumas associated with, I don't know, I came out, it was difficult, challenging, and problematic on both ends, me and my parents, right? I came out of them in this way that I was like, I'm trans, this is my identity, I'm gonna stake my damn claim. And to be fair, it's not, I shouldn't have had to put up with the bullshit that came after. At the same time, I think there's a way in which I just implicated them in like these Western ideas of homophobia and transphobia when I did that. And so what I'm seeking this summer, I'm going back to India, is sort of a way to, not to recapture like India, oh my god, India, but to build community with sexual and gender minorities in India, in Tamil Nadu in particular, which is the state that my family's from. And I think I spend a lot of time in the United States sort of foregrounding queerness and gender and sexuality and all these things, and I'm actually happy to go there and just negotiate things. And I think there are ways that queerness is expressed, and it's not called, you know, hey, mom and dad, I'm gay. Like, it's just that funny boy, or the one with 3 spoons of sugar in his throat, or that one uncle. I have that one. I'm going to be that one girl. I use girl as a gender-inclusive word, GURL, just to clarify, because I use that all the time. But yeah, I'm both apprehensive and afraid, gender girl, and also really excited to explore what that means. And to visit more temples and write about them.
Yeah. Go to the one in Bangalore, Islam Temple.
Oh, I've been.
Oh, I love that temple.
So, I'm also from Bangalore.
Oh my god!
As well. I just want to know, there's a lot of silencing, you know, in Indian communities, especially when it comes to sexuality. So were there things like that you did before to like break that silence? Like, how did you go about it? Because I find myself in a space where it's too silent sometimes. Like, people cannot say or do things because in the name of culture, or like they say it's like tradition, or, you know, especially when it comes to sexuality. So I'm just curious to know how you fought that.
I think with my parents in particular, I'll get to a broader community in a second, but my parents in particular, coming out process, whatever you want to call it, coming in process, was really about acknowledging that my parents are people, and while I sort of put them on a pedestal as humans who were supposed to take care of me as a kid, my mom is a woman, my dad is a guy, like they have their own histories and traumas and things, with shit that they're dealing with, and I need to relate to them on that level, and be patient in a way. Not all the time, set defined boundaries, etc. But they're going to be silent about a lot of things in my life, and for example, my parents have not heard the majority of my poems, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a step-by-step process. You're probably not going to hear some of my work, and that's just going to be the way it is. In terms of broader community, Alok and I talk a lot about, I think part of it is that the South Asian community, early South Asian settler migrants to the US, right, had a particular like caste class privilege attached to them. This has become one of the most assimilated diasporas in the United States. And I don't know, it's just really hard to see my own people just being like super ascendant and complicit in white supremacy and anti-blackness in particular in a lot of ways. And I'm thinking about ways to politicize and mobilize. I met a lot of more and more radical South Asians, which is really great. Those are the folks who are sort of breaking through that silence and having those conversations. But I think a lot of that silence comes from having immigrated and having this particular conception of South Asia as this particular place. Meanwhile, South Asia is like moving along and doing other things. Like when you come here, that notion of South Asia is very static in your mind. So that's a way that I'm beginning to unpack, what my community is like, things that have happened. I was fortunate enough to get to be reached out to by another South Asian trans guy, actually after one of my pieces online, who was from my community. I'd never heard of this person. So there's this intent, we're out there, these people are out there. But you're right, there's a certain kind of silence, and part of it is that there aren't quite the linguistics to talk about it openly in our communities. Part of it is this sort of intense class-inflected and caste-inflected, inflected is also appropriate, assimilation that has happened in diaspora. So I'm struggling with that consistently. More and more it's just sort of trying to meet queer Lacies. I met like a 60-year-old queer Lacy guy. It was awesome because he looks like my uncles, but he's like talking about Grindr in Bangalore, right? So it was like having me playing onto a body that looks like my uncle. It's like, word, yeah. Okay. What if I had been a bag 30 years ago? It would have been a hell of fun. Yeah. Sort of both. It's not that I don't agree with it. I think it definitely has its uses. I think a lot of the activist communities I've been involved with, person of color has been a particularly insidious way that racist attitudes that different people of color groups have towards each other and the ways in which those communities benefit from those racist attitudes and racist systems. South Asian diaspora being one example. I think an easy way to assimilate into white supremacy is to be an anti-black person. And that has happened sort of consistently across many diasporic South Asian communities. And thinking about that, thinking about the ways that the ways in which our communities become complicit in economic injustice, in police and state brutality as a result of the racist attitudes we hold, I think it becomes something that's erased or often invisibilized by just consistently calling us people of color, like as if there's this happy dance going on and there's no difference between our different groups. So more and more, especially someone who, in that article I talked about it, I grew up in St. Louis, which is one of the most heavily black-white segregated cities in the country, because Missouri still hasn't figured out hello, we were a slave state. And I don't know, so that shit gets really ignored and erased. Thinking about what my racial position was, right? We were there, there's a South Asian community there, but it is a different racial experience for sure than the black community there, than the Chicano community there, who were largely laborers, right? And we're a very small portion of the population. So thinking about the differences in our struggle, I think can actually enhance the ways in which we can do battle or resist white supremacy. That we start to think about building coalition and resisting racism within our own communities as well.
Yeah. You mentioned that your family, your parents, haven't really seen a lot of your performances. How do they feel about the ones they've seen, and how do you feel about whether or not they see them? Are you scared of what they'll think or them finding it out? Because I know I don't really express myself through art so much as I blog on Tumblr and stuff, and I know that I'm really afraid of my mom seeing things that I'm expressing that might relate to her and family.
I have a feeling my parents will find things that I put on the internet eventually. Or maybe they already have, they just don't tell me about it. Maybe there's an intense silence around it. at this point, I'm like, okay, if that happens, we can have that conversation. I think I don't want to bring them actively to a show yet. I'm not ready for that. They've seen my rainbow piece, 'cause it like doesn't mention people. It's just all about leprechauns and colors. And they like that. I send them a lot of my written poetry, which also isn't sort of specifically queer people of color, hey. But they know who I am, roughly. I don't think they know everything about my life. I'll never sort of reveal that point. But, yeah, it's just I mean, I think my most radical political moment, like transformational moment, will be when I'm able to talk to my mom and like tell her everything that I do. But I'm not there yet.